So great. Thank you for staying. This is never, ever a good idea to agree to be the proverbial blockage to cocktails. So we appreciate it enormously. I am very, very pleased to have Lydia Daly, who's Senior Vice President of Viacom Velocity, with us this afternoon. Lydia. And Michael Rosen, who is Vice President of Sales for Foursquare. He was previously AT&T AdWorks, but has been at Foursquare for a couple of years. So let's go. Let's talk about a time in our world that I don't think that anybody would deny that this is the most disruptive environment for every single business that all of us are in, and then some. And when you think about that, I think about it as requiring transformation. I don't think that's a choice. It's that wonderful, wonderful expression, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. So I think the opportunity that we all have to seize on in this very disruptive environment, we have to be transformative and we have to be innovative. And I think what both of your companies have done are great illustrations of that. So Michael, let's start with you and Foursquare. So Foursquare obviously invented the check-in app, and we all love that brand and got very, very familiar with it. But as consumers evolved, so too has Foursquare's business to, correct me if I'm not quite right on this one, but I think about 90% of your revenue is now derived from selling location data to your partners. So you've really evolved to a B2B versus B2C company. So can you talk a little bit about, from a product standpoint, first of all, about how and why you evolved that way?
Why we did it, yeah. Thanks, Wenda. Thanks for joining us right before drinks. So for those of you who were here for Christie's presentation, how many of you visited Target? Right. Okay, so think about what you did before you went to Target. What places did you go to, right? But also think about where you went after, right? More than likely, you each did something different, and that was, kind of what the evolution of Foursquare started to be as we invented the check-in, and we spent the past 8 years or 9 years actually having 11 billion people, over 11 billion times people have actually checked in somewhere, right? That I'm at a Target, I'm at this bar, I'm at Katsuya outside. And through that, we built this amazing map of the world with about 105 million venues. So this evolution, it's actually really cool, because it's like, wow, we're seeing and understanding the consumer pathway. And then it was, how do we provide services and value to brands and agencies and publishers using that data. So it was really about kind of location intelligence and moving from, we're still a consumer business, and that is kind of the core and frankly the differentiator a little bit about what we're doing. There's not too many, there's very few if not any consumer businesses who are kind of in this location space fully. So it's a really interesting kind of oversight around media measurement and analytics.
Can you give, I know that, I remember, I think it was Chipotle, was that the great example? Tell everybody about that, because I think it just brings it home exactly, what this is, and it's really quite fascinating if you're not familiar with what Foursquare is doing for marketers and their agencies.
So what we started to do is we're looking at all this data, all the foot traffic data, and all the insights that come with that. And what we started to do is predictions. And we looked at Chipotle from a standpoint of sales, from a quarterly perspective. And based on our first-party consumer foot traffic, we saw that we believed that Chipotle was actually going to have a 30% increase in sales. So what then we went back with is when Wall Street predicted, or Wall Street went on and actually said what the earnings were after the Chipotle call, was about, the call, it was actually, Wall Street predicted 22%, right? And the sales went up 29.7. So.
And you had called it at 30.
We called it at 30. So
awesome.
What's cool about that is, that we've done that with iPhone 6s sales. We've done that with understanding foot traffic into McDonald's versus Taco Bell for their breakfast initiatives. So because, those 11 billion times consumers have actually, said that they're at a place, and then there's also other signals that we're getting from our partners, which I'll talk about in a little bit, it allows us to actually go out and make some really impactful choices that actually also not only agencies and brands and publishers, but Wall Street's using too. So there's a lot of quant companies and hedge funds and others who are using this data to trade on. So you have to be precise, you have to be exact, and you can't be third party. You have to really own the data.
And you have to scale.
You have to have scale too.
Right.
Yep.
Now that's a good one. So Lydia, let's move into the content area. It's almost impossible to look at any media company today and not see some kind of a studio. If you're Condé Nast, you have 23 stories, and Time Inc. has the Foundry, and the New York Times has T-Brand Studio. But you actually Viacom Velocity was started in 2014, which was much earlier than the other companies. So what was the rationale for developing Velocity, and how does it fit into the Viacom family?
So first of all, full disclosure, I also started at Viacom in 2014, so I like to think all the nice things I'm about to say about Velocity are all related to me and is not a coincidence. But joking aside, it is seen as a success, and to answer your question, the reason it came about really at its core was kind of the natural evolution of our business. So I would say that in the past, conversations with advertisers and agencies were led by media first. So there would be a media conversation, and then they'd say, what can you do to sweeten that deal? What creative can you offer me, et cetera? And that conversation, I think as the industry started to change, that conversation changed, and they started to say, can you talk to me about the creative first, and then we'll decide how much we're going to spend in terms of media. And I think the things that kind of instigated that change in the industry were, I think, social media getting so important. I think for Viacom specifically, our social media footprint for the audience that we target, which is predominantly millennials, was extremely high in comparison to what our advertisers could offer themselves. And so we had to kind of bring about Viacom Velocity, and to give you an idea of how it was before and how it is now. So in pre-Viacom Velocity, there were siloed marketing teams. So Comedy Central would have a bunch of creatives, and they would have some kind of client service people. So would MTV, so would every single channel. And that worked well because you had channel specialists, but what you tended not to have was specialists in other areas that we kind of needed them to have. And by centralizing that, that allows us to invest in talent when it came to social media, when it came to data and analytics. It allowed us to kind of invest money in innovations in those areas. And then the final thing that I will say is that when you have teams that are dedicated to certain channels, it's human nature that they feel kind of indebted to those channels. So sometimes the advertiser was not coming first in the conversation. So at Viacom Velocity, we represent the advertiser. We then negotiate with the channels as to what we can get, and we try and build a program according to the brief that we've been given. I think when you're siloed with a channel and you work for MTV, MTV is as important to you in that conversation. And it should be important, but it shouldn't be first and foremost.
Great. So if you think about the number of, just a sort of plethora of choice that the consumer has in terms of all the different platforms and distribution channels that are out there, it seems once again that it's just growing and growing and growing with just sort of this extraordinary exponential rate. So if you think about, we've talked a number of times during this conference about quality of content. But to marketers, of course, scale really, really matters. So when you think about the volume of content that you deliver versus the quality of the content that you're creating for your audiences, how does data play into helping you with that balance? Mm-hmm. Either.
I would think first and foremost that you can have volume with quality. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. I know it's the holy grail, but I think it's something everybody should strive for. I believe strongly that distribution strategies should be thought of at the same time as your creative strategy. So when you're coming up with the idea, you should be thinking about where it's going to live. It shouldn't be a case of, I've got a really great piece of content, now where am I going to put it and how is somebody going to see it?
Are you making a case for creative and media agencies to
work together.
reassemble?
Work together, come together. But anyway, I think those two things are extremely important to kind of be in tandem, because sometimes your distribution strategy will drive your creative strategy. So you don't create the same piece of content that's going to do really, really well on linear, for example, something that's highly polished and has really high production value does well on linear, that doesn't do well on Snapchat video. The opposite is true. And so I think you need to think about those things together. And then in terms of quality, I think everyone's talking about transparency and how data can help really tell that story, but I think it's just as important when it comes to creative and distribution that you're extremely transparent with your results, that you're giving them as much as you have, and it's not just, we got you 2 million views, but it's, we got you 2 million views, and this was the completion rate and the retention rate, and this is whatever metrics are available to you, that you can be as transparent.
Well, I think as we were talking in the green room, you know, our industry at large loves to latch on to buzzwords and then beat them to death. When you think about data isn't the thing. It's the derivative of the data that has the real value. It's the consumer insight derived from that data. And that in the end that's what marketers want more than anything, is consumer insight. And I think that speaks very much to Michael, what you're doing at Foursquare.
Yeah, and actually from a content creation perspective, it's really interesting because, you know, just talking about data, you know, obviously there's value, but it, in a lot of ways, commoditizes the discussion.
Yes.
And the insights and the learning that comes out of it, I think, is where the true value comes in. So from a content perspective, I would kind of ask you all to think about, you know, as you're looking at all these different data sources out there, you know, for the creatives in the room and the folks who are influencing creative, you know, what kind of data could actually help with messaging, with, you know, are you finding the right audiences, kind of co-promotion? You know, we're actually, you know, so on the media side, you know, we do have scale, so we're reaching 150 million US consumers north of that. But then from a standpoint of how we're helping agencies and brands, you know, we're working with a lot of you in the room on how to influence that content, you know, not necessarily from us, but from you. So, you know, if you think that you're marketing to a specific audience, looking at kind of what I get back to with that path to purchase with, you know, the customers that went to Target, where they go before and after, those kinds of people are really different. And the kinds of places they go and the chains that they go to and the tastes that they engage in. You know, I know a lot of you, right, your tastes will be, you know, martinis and wine and beer in about 20 minutes, but you know, there's a lot of interesting tastes out there that actually influences content. It influences acquisition. So I think there's a lot of use cases for data beyond just ingesting it.
We actually have an interesting example where a couple of years ago, the data team and our sales organization spent a lot of time investing in this tool that was meant to give you kind of the holy grail of answers as to what content you should create. So it was very much a data tool, and at the end, when you programmed everything into it, it was going to spit out, this is the talent that you should use in terms of on-air talent, this is the social talent, these are the shows you should align with, this is the subject matter of the category, et cetera, so on and so forth. There was lots of different things. And it really has died a death, and we kind of predicted, in the marketing space, we kind of knew, because there was no person casting their eye over that, or there was no art to that science. You know, sometimes what the numbers tell you, you should actually do the complete opposite, because that's the same as what everybody else does, or that particular talent they're telling you to work with, I don't know, is not available to us, or it's horrible to work with. Like, there's just so many different aspects to it that you need to kind of apply that art and science that everybody else talks about.
I was going to say, I think we're really, you know, I think in the digital space, I mean, I felt like for 17 of the 22 years I've been digital, I felt like I was living in a science, math, and technology class, and I never gave up on the notion that content really matters, brand really matters. And I think in the last 4 or 5 years or so, I think we've come back a little bit to center. And I think we appreciate, you know, that we have to have something to put on all these devices, and that human instinct and gut and intuition, it's okay. And, you know, just because we can measure all of these things, not always well, but we have the capability to measure so much, can you really measure art? Can machines design great quality content? They can contribute, but without that human touch. So I think we're helping our friends in the digital space understand that some of things really do matter. Another phenomenon that I think is very, very exciting in the business, and you both recently announced some interesting partnerships. Viacom has a newly formed alliance with the Fox Networks Group and Turner, and I think this partnership is designed to standardize how you purchase audience segments, how you measure them across networks, and the goal, I think, is to provide robust measurement at scale, again, which will in turn advance a new industry standard. And I think you're going to be talking or planning to unveil a little bit more about this alliance this week, I think. But can you, Lydia, just talk to us a little bit more about this partnership and your view of the future of media buying and how this alliance will help it evolve?
So I think this partnership is the perfect example that kind of brings to life our view of media buying. So we, and what we think the future is for that. So we definitely want to be able to be much more targeted and much more transparent for our advertisers and our agencies. 2 years ago, I think now, we launched what we call Vantage, which is our advanced audience targeting technology. Turner and Fox have similar offerings, and what was happening for all of us was that advertisers and agencies were extremely keen to buy into this, and it made perfect sense for them, except the logistics of it did not make sense. So when it came to defining what is the audience segment, that was different when they were working with Viacom. It was different when they were working with Fox and so on. When it came to measuring the performance of the campaign, those metrics were all different, so they couldn't compare across all. And
a common currency issue,
common currency,
which we've had for a very long time. So
Right.
This is part of your
this is part of the
proposed
solution. Right. So everybody still transacts separately, except we've kind of come to a uniform way of defining the audience and measuring. And we have a third-party auditor, which they'll be announcing at this event that we're having on Thursday, to kind of get to that transparency aspect. But it's something very exciting, and I think it kind of builds on the fact that we're continuously trying to do partnerships in every realm of our business. So that one happens to be in data and in targeting, but there kind of is no area that we work in that hasn't been touched by a partnership in some capacity, I would say.
So when you look at other kinds of partnerships, you just mentioned distribution analytics. What about something like casting? Is there going to be a way, for example, to provide better levels of efficiency and certainly on the analytics side for marketers?
So I guess going back to what we were just talking about in terms of data being important, but the fact that there's an art and a science, the same is true for casting. So casting nowadays, whether it's social influencers or regular talent, is in essence no different to the way it was 15, 20 years ago. You're still dealing with people and you want to get the right person tailored to whatever the brief is or whatever the project is. I think what's different is that there are more social influencers, and even the people who are more traditional talent also are influential socially. That becomes important because when you're thinking about your creative and your distribution strategy together, you're thinking about those numbers up front and how it's going to perform. To whittle down the millions of influencers and social talent out there and try to get to a manageable list to cast from, there are many tools that are available. We have partnerships with a number of tools. We have taken not a stance, but our positioning is that rather than have one partner in each area, we like to have multiple partners, take the best, and then try and add our own special sauce. And that's no different with casting. So we have partnerships with companies like Tubular and Julius, who help us kind of whittle down that big list and then get it to a manageable size for our casting team to cast their eye over it and work out who's right for the brief.
Well, this one with the alliance, it's Fox and Turner and Viacom. I think one of the things that's very, very interesting about this is traditionally you have been direct competitors for those ad dollars, and it's not really about tools, but you're now bedfellows. Yeah. And I think again, I think we're seeing some very, very interesting. Linda Yaccarino this afternoon was talking about some of the efforts that she and many others in the industry are making to pull together solutions to some of these issues, and certainly Mark Pritchard this morning asking all of us, simplify, simplify, simplify. And somehow we have a unique ability in this business to complicate the complicated. So it's great to see different kinds of companies coming together to form some of these solutions. And Michael, Foursquare, you just announced a partnership with Snapchat, which I think is going to be very interesting to see how a technology company like that can use your location data to attract brands looking to pinpoint consumers and drive deeper engagement, obviously. How are you encouraging the brands to use this data to achieve personalization at scale, which is certainly something that so many marketers are interested in, but also to deliver a better experience for the consumer?
Yep. So what we've seen also as this evolution has happened over the past couple of years are that brands with pristine consumer experiences need to have location that is exact for their experiences, right? So Snapchat, Uber, Samsung, Twitter, Pinterest, all of these, and about 100,000 other consumer apps are actually looking for us to be the location infrastructure within their consumer experiences. So in the Snapchat case, when you geo-filter a snap, that geolocation is powered by Foursquare. Samsung actually, we just last week with the Galaxy 8 launch, so we actually are integrated into Bixby. So that so basically, if I'm standing upstairs and I want to take a picture of the Hollywood sign, that I can put my camera on it, and Pinterest will be the recognition, and then Foursquare will be the venue to actually say the Hollywood sign and allow you to kind of tag that venue. So it's really interesting that a lot of those consumer businesses, the amount of validation and time and scrutiny that goes into making sure that, like, what are the businesses out there that can provide that? There's fewer far between. There's us, there's Google, who can actually do that. So to your question about the data side, what a lot of those partnerships allow us to do, so we don't have access to the data from a monetization perspective, but what we do is it allows us to strengthen our signals, our location signals, to say, we want to make sure that Hollywood sign is where it says it is, so that when someone goes there, or we're targeting based on people who go to the Hollywood sign, it is 100% accurate. So how brands then can kind of engage with us at scale is, it's really about, from a media perspective, looking at precise audiences and understanding how location actually impacts that. So one of the interesting, and then also kind of the residual impact that those insights get. So it's a 1-2 punch, right? Like, you all are buying media out there. So how do you make sure that if you're buying a female 18 to 49 audience, how do you make sure that that's actually the audience? And our point of view is that location and where you go is the best indicator of who you are. So we have mechanisms to do that. But then the insight that you get are critical to driving business, both on the agency side, but to your brands, to your clients. So for example, we have a casual dining company that we work with, and as a result of the media campaigns, they're actually taking the taste data that they get because of the consumer business, and they're actually influencing the menu items on a quarterly basis. So there's a media component, but there are components that when you're talking to the C-level, to the CMO, to the CEO, those are really, really important. And we have use cases of these things from a standpoint of, do I close stores? Do I open stores? Am I targeting the right people? So I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago with a chief digital officer, and he called his people and he's like, look at our customers. These are our customers, not the people who we think are. And so that's where I think location intelligence, us and other companies out there, really, it's beyond just checking the box on location. It's how does location actually drive huge business KPIs?
But that has so many implications beyond marketing, for sure, in terms of, you're talking about product development, certainly R&D, critical business decisions. Where do I open? Where do I close? So that's going to be big.
It's huge. And so we actually just launched also so a business that works with brands on dashboards around that. So they can actually see in a dynamic way foot traffic into their stores and also their competitors' stores. So it's pretty amazing.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Are all of those, I'm just finding this really interesting, are all of those partnerships you have with the social networks then just continuing to build your pool of data about where people are going and what?
Some do, some don't. But you need to refresh. And so let's take Katsuya, because I've only been there twice since I've been here. So it's,
blowing up on Foursquare.
Exactly. So, you don't need millions and millions of people to actually check in there to know it's there, right? It's about refreshing it on a certain rate to make sure that how Katsuya looks is very different from Starbucks, very different than Wolfgang's, because when it comes back to audience targeting, perhaps the people who go to Starbucks and Wolfgang's is very different than the Katsuya audience, because the Katsuya folks are going to nightclubs after, and they're then going to underground speakeasies, and then they're going to Griffin Park, right? Whereas Starbucks folks might be, business travelers who are, then going to LAX. So it tells a really interesting story that we need those validations to be absolutely precise rather than being, drawing a radius or a tile or just guesstimating, which is not accurate.
Yeah. So I want to cover one more topic. I keep hearing this noise. Do you think they're starting a party without us?
Yeah, it's a little.
I'm worried about it. Hang in there just a few more minutes, I promise. I want to talk about talent for a minute, because I think that, I know at Foursquare, certainly you brought in vets from brands, from technology companies, from industry organizations, and you can't really innovate without a lot of, sort of new and fresh talent within these companies. So how, to both of you, how has talent influenced the culture of your evolving organizations?
I mean, it's everything for us. And, it's been interesting. A lot of us, myself included, we've seeked out Foursquare. And, through that, we have people who've opted in to, whether it's, a Gail who was this CEO of the ARF, or, Andy Chapman, who is at Mindshare, and, we have someone in MX, we have someone who is a professor at Columbia doing a lot of data science. So there's this really, I always kind of say it's like there's the people who get it, right? This is the gut, this is the art to the science. But we have people who really, I think, understand how location can play a role in everyone's lives, and do it in a very above board, transparent way. So I think that's really incredible. And then the other thing I would say is, from a company value perspective, listen to every voice is really important for us. And so it just kind of breeds that, really curious, powerful woman or man who's really going to drive things forward, and also can tell a story. I think we lose a lot of the storytelling, and I think that, I'll tell you that the best folks who we have who, are providing the best value to our clients are the ones who can tell a really powerful story with the data and make it meaningful and not sell.
Well, and it's also fun, I think, in our excitement about technology and all that it can do. You think about what advertising is at its very heart. It's creating desire, first and foremost. And if you can't convince people, dream a little dream with me, and tell that story instead of trying to tell the story, through optimization and we lost a little bit of that along the way. And I, for one, am excited to see it come back. It's so critical. And Lydia, in terms of your company and what you've done with Viacom Velocity, I mean, from the very start, you had to have brought in different kinds of talent in order to even create it.
I think a good metaphor for it is thinking of us like perhaps we were more like a traditional, what you would call a traditional agency that focused very much on TV. And so we had to evolve into a more modern agency with people who specialized in all different areas and not just a 30-second spot that would live on one of our channels. So we've had to definitely bring in a lot more creative talent that have expertise in other areas, particularly around social, like how to create great content for social, and that's so specific according to which platform. And then there are other areas that we had no expertise in, such as data analytics, and measurement and those kind of areas. And so we've definitely had to staff up in those areas too to be able to deliver that reporting and predictions and all of those types of things. Mm-hmm.
So assuming that this sort of fierce combination of the volume of change and the velocity of change, if we assume that it continues at this torrid pace, how are you thinking about your companies staying relevant? Because we're living in this world of no rest for the weary and no leaning back and saying, hey, I've nailed it. How are you thinking about that question of relevancy?
I guess for us, being traditionally a TV company, that question is very prevalent.
Yes.
I think we'll continue to invest in the areas that we are investing in. I think we're creating a digital content studio, for example, which kind of gives you a sense of where we're thinking we're going to move forward. I think for Velocity specifically, our kind of strategy for this is to plan for everything and expect nothing. So you kind of think you know where it's going, but you're not quite sure. And so you need to be able to turn on a dime, I guess, and just change strategy or be ready for a brand new social network that has just launched and now everybody's on it and you need to create content for that. So I think just being able to adapt very quickly and not expect anything too far into the future.
Great.
I think for us, at the end of the day, it's the business KPI. It's how to drive a brand's business. So you don't always have to look at the bright, shiny next thing. It's how do we really add value? And I think there were a lot of talk over the last couple days, obviously with Google and Facebook taking up a lot of the media dollars. I think there are best-in-class companies out there who do it just as well, maybe even better, that will continue to innovate. So, I think as you're all looking, and there were a lot of discussions around that, when you're looking for partners, really kind of get under the hood and ask some important questions. And I'll leave you with again, to Mark Pritchard's kind of keep it simple. So 3 things to ask of clients when they're thinking about location, because I would assume there's a lot of talk about location. It's one is, ask the company, what piece of software can I download on my phone to kind of see how precise you are with location? Mm-hmm. That's number 1. Number 2 is it always on, right? Is it pervasive, or is it just picking up bid calls and ad calls? And then number 3 is, what's the consumer experience? How can I actually see the consumer output of that location data? So that's from a location perspective, but I think really asking those questions of any data partner that you're working with, how do I see it? How do I touch it? And that's going to help you, I think, figure out ways to really value the impact that has.
Well, great. So Lydia, Michael, thank you very much for agreeing to play, last batter. But thank you again. We really, really appreciate your staying this late with us, and have a good time tonight.
Thank you.